Welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, healer, tarot enthusiast, and your local witch next door. And today I'll be talking about the King of Swords. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. If you love the show, the best way to support it is by listening daily, leaving a review, and subscribing or following in your favorite podcast app. For monthly hangouts, tarot Q&As, individual readings, and behind-the-scenes peeks, join the Everyday Tarot Patreon family. If you're local to the greater Puget Sound area, check out the Let's Talk Tarot meetup group for my latest event postings. If you're not local to my area, you can join me for a virtual tarot card creation event on Friday, June 20th at 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I'll give you a list of recommended supplies, we'll meet online, and I'll walk you through the process of creating your own cards. Get the date on your calendar now and be on the lookout for the sign-up page coming soon. If you're interested in my free PDF with the 2025 5-card tarot spread I created just for you at the beginning of this year, you can get that by joining my newsletter list. My weekly newsletter always has the most up-to-date information on upcoming events, presentations, musings, and info and photos of my day-to-day life. If you don't already know, I'm a sex and relationships therapist, seeing clients virtually all over Washington State. I love working with queer, poly, and witchy clients. If you'd like to work with a therapist that doesn't judge and helps you learn how to deal with anxiety, chronic pain or illness, communication issues, self-advocacy, and sex, head to my website and book a free consultation now. You can find the links for any of these offers in the show notes or on my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot, in addition to the images of the cards I pull. All right, so we are in season 8 now, where I'm talking all about the Suit of Swords, going through each card one per episode. If you haven't listened to my other seasons yet, you can check those out. In season 1, I talked tarot basics. In seasons 2 and 3, I went through the major arcana and the 4 suits. Season 4 was all about tarot and pop culture. Season 5, I went through 13 common tarot spreads. Season 6, the Suit of Wands. Season 7, the Suit of Pentacles. And now I'm on to the last episode of season 8, where I'm talking all about the Suit of Swords. If you want to hear an episode dedicated to an overview of the whole Suit of Swords, you can check out episode 37. And today I'm talking about the King of Swords. So if you have a tarot deck accessible, go ahead and take it out and look through for your King of Swords image. Some common images or symbols for the card. As I'm looking at some of my decks in the Ophidia Rosa Tarot deck by Leela and Olive, this deck is a lot of like plants and flowers. So we have like 3 different branches of plants. It looks like 3 different kinds of flowers that are sort of 2 are depicted diagonally, like in the top left corner to the bottom right. And then we have another one crossing on the right there. It looks like some maybe sunflowers or calendula or marigolds, some like peonies perhaps, and then some smaller flowers that I'm not totally sure about. And we have different sort of leaf images on them. And then we have like a picture of a human eye in the bottom left corner. And then we have all these like glimmers or almost like the sun shine, like where we have rays coming out from the eye here with the King of Swords. In the Goddess of Love Tarot deck by Gabriella Herstick and illustrated by Julia Popescu, the King is renamed to the Crone of Swords. So I believe it goes Maiden, Witch, Queen, Crone in this deck. And she is looking wild and fabulous. She's got this like purple hair, almost kind of like an afro, but like the tendrils are coming out from it as well, like it's all standing up from her head. She has like an owl, I believe, swooping, no, not an owl, some kind of like bird of prey swooping in or sort of like affixed in her hair. She has on like a corset. And then we see all these roses, like some of which are sort of on her like a sash or like a necklace. Then we see large roses in the background. She looks very like put together and sort of solemn or focused. And then she has, like in her right hand, she has a sword that she's holding. And again, not really in like a position of like ready to stab someone, but she looks like able to and ready to do so. And just she's got like purpley red lipstick on, like just very strong energy, I would say. And then in the Therapist Who Tarot deck, prompts by Drea Bloom and images by Rebecca Bloom, we have the King of Swords here. It says it's all about grace under pressure. And I would say that that's sort of what the crone looks like in the Goddess of Love deck as well, that we sort of have this like, she's seriously very powerful, clearly, but also she looks like no problem, right? Like no matter what's going on, like I've got it. So in the Therapist Who Tarot deck, we see sort of like a somewhat abstract like image of a human with we see like their face, and they have like, again, purple as like the accent features. We get this sort of like halo or hair around the person. They're depicted in sort of like a reddish pink watercolor, and they're sort of surrounded by this like circle, almost like an orb or like a bubble. Um, and then from the bottom of the circle or bubble, there are all these swords that look like they're coming into the image, which again could be that like indication of pressure, or again, if we think of like battle, like so many things are coming at them. But there's sort of like, again, feeling this grace, like they know how to handle it. They're well practiced. On the back, we have reflection questions for this card that says, what feels out of balance in your life? What compromise do you most regret? And how might you improve your self-care regimen? All right. So in the Library of Esoterica, Tarot book by Taschen, they talk about that this card is all about harmony and objectivity. The King of Swords symbolizes capable decision-making and assertive patriarchal power executed without judgment. In the Tarot and Astrology book by Karine Kenner, they talk about that, just one more page here, that the King of Swords is associated with Aquarius. It says the King of Swords, the ruler of air, is a powerful, authoritative commander who makes decisions based on solid logic and intellectual prowess. Elementally, the four kings of the tarot are airy intellectuals. They simply combine the element of air with the corresponding element in their own suit. So, in that regard, the King of Swords embodies the rarefied combination of air with air. Clearly, he's assertive and alert. He can even be aggressive. He guards his kingdom with passion and force, and he's not afraid to make arbitrary decisions. He's willing and able to defend his realm and dispense justice in accordance with his rule. He's forward-thinking, determined, and idealistic. In other words, the King of Swords can be a firm friend or a vengeful enemy. The King of Swords also represents the fixed air sign of Aquarius, which makes him a forward-thinking, socially conscious monarch. Like his major arcana counterpart, the Star, he's ethereal. From his position high in the sky, he can see the big picture. And like Aquarius's ruling planet, Uranus, he can overturn old ways of thinking and establish new institutions that better serve the needs of his kingdom. The King of Swords rules the third decan of Capricorn and the first and second decans of Aquarius. In a natural horoscope, his primary domain is the 11th house of social groups and causes. And the name that they talk about for this card is the intellectual determination of fixed air. And in the image they show in the book of the King of Swords, we see a man holding a sword like upright with a crown on, and then we see these sort of like jagged, almost like wings of like a butterfly or birds coming out from behind them. Then we see birds in the background as well, which again, birds are really emblematic of the air element or air sign, right? Because they inhabit the air. They come swooping in. They look upon from on high, and they can sort of see things in a broad view, right? Like again, literally from above, like a bird's eye view, right? We have that phrase, or as the crow flies, which again is just imagining that, okay, if you are going in the way of a bird, you don't have to, right, necessarily obey the road or go a certain, like follow certain paths. You can go wherever you want, unless there's like really tall trees or other obstacles in the way. But for the most part, in the air, there aren't any obstacles there. Um, all right. In the Fearless Tarot book by Elliot Adam, they talk about that the King of Swords is all about challenging your assumptions. It says the King of Swords appears to be a stern man. In fact, for many, he is the archetype of the man, the societal structures that unconsciously direct us to assume our place. The King of Swords asks us to examine how we might be limiting ourselves based on our own assumptions. The King is concerned with hierarchy, balance, and structure. Even the two birds in the distance fly with one clearly being on top. So again, we get birds in the back of the image of the Rider-Waite Smith depiction of the card. It says, are you unconsciously allowing old or fixed views to color your perception of yourself or others? Do you feel like you're limited or can't get ahead because you're a woman, a minority, gay, poor, or disabled? Or do you feel like the deck is stacked against you? Do you look at others who are different than you with assumptions before you really get to know them? All of us are raised in a world of assumptions. As children, we're unconsciously presented with attitudes of racism, sexism, and phobias that color our eventual view of the world. People fear what they do not understand. When the King of Swords appears, he places you in contact with your own assumptions. Every now and then, we need to challenge those assumptions in order to grow. It says the King of Swords is not an evil king. His real interest is preserving the security of the system. He argues that established precedent is far better than change. Sometimes the King of Swords symbolizes a difficulty with changing your mind about something that seems settled. Although the king looks fixed, look closer. There are butterflies covering his throne. This represents that systems can be changed, assumptions can be transformed, and old divisions can be healed through understanding. The King of Swords can change his mind. Here's the biggest secret. The King of Swords is part of us, the part that needs to lose its rigidity. What part of you feels rigid? Are you dismissing whole groups of people simply because they have a different viewpoint, politics, ethnicity, or other social identifier? What calcified attitudes in the world would you like to see change? Are you encountering these traits in someone else around you? In order to change fixed attitudes, we must understand them. The King of Swords represents understanding things more acutely so that you can make reasoned arguments and arrive at conclusions that are evidence-based. The King of Swords is at his best when he applies critical thinking and logical arguments. Sometimes he appears in the form of a loved one who challenges your viewpoints or assumptions. You will never win a full-on battle with the King of Swords. He is heavily entrenched and armored. He can be a fixed personality, or he may represent an institution or organization that is set in its ways. When the King of Swords appears, win him over with clarity, evidence, and reason. The king can change his mind, but only if it makes logical sense to do so. The King of Swords can represent a rigid authority figure who is slow to change. Kings can be mature people of any gender who are leaders or figures of authority. All right. Wanted to look at what some of the tarot deck guidebooks said about the King of Swords as well. So Nalila and Olive of Vidia Rosa tarot deck. For this card, they talk about that the king is stems stronger than pens, leaves bolder than ink, so aware of misfortune we never would blink. Which I think really goes back to the idea of like the King of Swords is being fixed, right? That they're kind of no matter what you say or do, they will sort of remain unblinking, right? They're going to remain in that place in the system, in the structures that they know and love, I would say. Um, and that, yeah, there's a lot of like strength in this card. But as the Fearless Tarot book talked about, right, like sometimes systems can be swayed with logic or data over time. I think often it's a very slow process, and that can feel very intimidating, challenging, not worthwhile of our time. But I think, right, with really big systems and things that have been really entrenched in culture or society. Like, it can take a lot to move or change those systems. In the Goddess of Love tarot deck, they talk about the King of Swords is the elemental correspondence of fire of air. With the precision of a diamond and just as multifaceted a perspective, the Crone of Swords swoops in like a falcon, ready to snatch its prey and feed the family. Get explicit about what's necessary right here, right now. The card asks you to get out of your heart and into your head, not because there's anything wrong with what you're feeling, but because you need to channel the logic of the Crone of Swords to get through. She is not afraid to use force, with discernment when it is called for. Embrace your boundaries or turn to someone who lives the energy of this card to support you in finding balance and order. The journal question for this card says, how can I commit to the clear-cut vision of the Crone of Swords? And the affirmation is, I claim my power, my vision, and my truth as guiding forces in love and lust. And finally, in the Tarot for Change book by Jessica Dorr, they talk about that the King of Swords really embodies this idea of the power of life and death. And it says, the way to harnessing the power of life and death, says the King of Swords, is through developing concentration. And that's done through a practice where you consistently put your focus on something of your choosing and don't move it. Again, that sort of fixed energy. A good thing to know going into it is that you're going to move your focus a lot. I know people who have been meditating for hours a day for decades, and not one of them has mastered the ability to not move it. The point is that you make a commitment to putting your focus somewhere and then to bringing it back as often as you need to. I think that bringing it back is an integral part, or the muscle that lets you continuously come back to what your value bulks up. And this isn't the kind of thing you do once or for a week or even for a year and you're good. It needs to be ongoing, a sort of psychological hygiene practice like brushing your teeth. It says, and aside from bestowing you with the power of life and death, it isn't hard to see how the ability to fix your gaze on an object of your choosing would benefit you on the daily. If you love or believe in something, for example, and want to see it grow, the skill will help you be with that thing more fully and in a sustained way. When you're moving along towards something desired, there are endless ways to slip off the path, more types of traps and distractions than there are fish in the sea. When things you don't really want to give life to start tugging at you and your body is pulling in a direction you weren't trying to go, the King's focus can help you get good at returning. No matter where you find yourself, you know the way back. You don't beat yourself up. That's a distraction too, frankly. You just come back. When you've practiced this coming back in the microcosm of something like meditation, reading, prayer, or Sudoku, the psychic muscle memory kicks in with less effort when you need it for the big stuff. It says, when you loathe something, when you find your thoughts in a loop of disparaging or unhelpful patterns, you can also redirect. You can take your attention and place it somewhere else. It says, Catherine McCune had written that the control of attention is thus the first skill an inspiring magician must master, and perhaps the most important. The author writes, control is a tricky word when it comes to internal events. I personally don't believe we can control things like thoughts or feelings, for instance, but I do think that to an extent it will vary depending on the way our brains and environments are. We can hone our ability to put focus on what we wish to give value, what we wish to worship. As far as whether this is the first thing we need to learn, I'd suggest we go where our natural abilities lie in order to build strength and competence in things that come more easily to us before we toil in the realms that are more challenging. But I'll leave this for you, aspiring magician, to determine for yourself. So again, it's all about this idea of sort of like pulling focus right towards a specific thing. Again, if we think of swords as directed energy of intellect or strategy or long-term thinking, we have to think about, right, what is it that we are directing our focus toward? And like Jessica Dorr says, right, like it is a practice, right? There's lots of distractions. I think in the last episode in the Queen of Swords, I talked about sort of social media or just like other distractions that we can find. But this card is really asking us, right, to like think about our values, think about the things that are really important to us, and find ways to keep on track of that, right? To pull our attention back when it gets distracted, to sort of like tighten up what we're doing, right? Not try to do a bunch of things at once, whether multitasking or even like practices, but just to work on one thing at a time. And when we put sort of all of our energy or all of our focus into that thing, right, that is when the system can shift. Like that is when our routine can shift, or again, whatever it is we're trying to put focus on, that's when the shift happens, is what this card is trying to teach us. So let's dive in and see what the cards have to say today on the subject. And I'm pulling cards from the Citadel, a Fantasy Oracle by Fen Inkwright. Right, let's see here. So I'm going to be thinking about, right, what in our life do we need to pull focus back towards? Where are we getting distracted? How do we change big systems or culture when they can seem so rigid and fixed and unmoving? How do we channel the energy of, right, that falcon swooping down to get its prey, watching from above, picking the strategic right moment to go after the animal that it's trying to get for dinner, and thinking about, again, sort of surveying, like going through our habits, our routines, our life right now, getting sort of research and data about like what all are we doing, what thing is the most important thing that we're really wanting to work on or our highest value right now, and finding ways to pull our attention and our focus back to that. All right. I pulled the Forgotten, Missed Opportunities and Fear of Failure. It's a very striking card. A lot of these cards, so they're sort of like black and white, and then they have this like gold or sort of like, like gold leaf that are sort of on them. And usually there's a lot of that. And on this one, there's not a lot going on this card visually. Let's see here. All right, and I pulled it upright, so I'm going to read the upright. It says, a canal runs through the citadel, deep and silent, reflecting the evening lanterns. Little cafes line the banks, filled with conversation and laughter. Couples stroll past, wrapped up in their evening. No one sees the figure that passes them all by, gaze averted. The forgotten does not speak, nor hear, nor even see. They are so certain that they have nothing to give the world that they do not even try. The social pressure to say and do the right thing can be overwhelming, and no one gets it right every time. Don't allow the fear of making a mistake stop you from trying at all. You'll find yourself isolated from the very company you crave. Be aware of what is causing you this anxiety and turn that negative energy into something constructive. Right? So this is sort of telling us that, right, that maybe the thing that we really want, the thing that we've been trying to turn our attention back towards, maybe we're having a lot of like perfectionistic tendencies around, right, trying to make sure it's exactly right before we release it out into the world or talk to someone about it. And this is telling us, right, don't allow the fear of making a mistake stop you from trying at all. Otherwise, right, you're just going to be very isolated in that feeling. Right, we're going to be in our head, right, and like just like in the sword suit, overthinking, analyzing, right, getting anxiety about what's going on. And when we have that, it feels very isolating because we're experiencing the challenges all internally, right? Like oftentimes no one else can see that you're going through that. And so this card asks us, right, to be aware of what's causing the anxiety, and right, we're going to try to transmute, we're going to try to turn that energy into something constructive, right? Maybe that is the thing you're talking about, or that you start relating to other people about, or you just share the thing, right? And then we allow our focus, like the King or Crone of Swords, to come really clearly into that one thing. We're going to go forward with it no matter what anyone else says, right? We're going to really do it. I know that I was sort of like that about this podcast. I have been talking about it and talking about it and talking about it for probably like 6 months. And I think for a long time I was like, oh, I need help to do it, or oh, I want other people's buy-in, or I want other people to help me with it, or have guests on, or like have a guest host or a co-host. And it just wasn't like none of that was really happening, or I wasn't really getting anything out of that. And then in, I think, November, I think while meditating, got this sort of like what I would call like a download from the universe that was like, oh yeah, like you're calling it Everyday Tarot. That's the podcast. You're doing it every day, and you're committing to all of 2025. Um, and that was very scary to me at the time because I was like, cool, I'm going to go from doing no podcast. Being like, I'm a consumer of podcasts. I really like podcasts. But to go from nothing to actually, I'm going to put out a podcast every day, Monday through Friday for a whole year. Um, and with, very little help, especially at first. And I'm just going to make that happen. And I was sort of like, I have some ideas for seasons. I really want to talk about some things because I kept going to my tarot events, either social events or my tarot card crafting events. And we would always have kind of new people that were very into tarot that really wanted more. They wanted to talk about it a lot. They wanted us, like, where do I find information about this and all that kind of stuff. And I would talk about it a lot. But I wanted to sort of create a resource for people, right? That's why I'm going through every card right now, which can seem sort of boring in some ways. But also, it's like if you want to connect with a very particular card, like it's a very fun, cool thing to do, especially to look across different tarot decks. And so, yeah, that's sort of, I would say, like an example of like embodying this energy, right? Is like, I had people tell me like, oh, you don't need to do it every day. Or like, wow, that's a lot. Like, how are you going to do that? How are you going to put that into your schedule? Are you a therapist? Don't you see clients? Don't you have other stuff to do? And like, yeah, that's all true. But I love doing this. I love talking about tarot. I love having dedicated time for myself to create the podcast, right? To like dive into tarot almost every day as I'm recording podcasts. And yeah, it's been a very fun practice for me as well, because also, right, I get a lot out of this podcast as well. So I hope that you do too. So anyway, links for the tarot decks I talk about will always be in the show notes and on my website if you'd like to look at them or purchase them. And thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, like I talked about, the podcast comes out daily, Monday through Friday for all of 2025. I would love to hear from you. If you have any comments or questions or anything or love you want to share about the podcast, I would love to hear that. You can email me at me@CamilleASaunders.com. All right. See you soon. Bye-bye.